back in the 1970s, Osho wrote a book, or actually he gave lectures about the subject of sex, from sex to superconsciousness. And it raised quite a stir back in those days because it's taboo to even talk about sex. I mean, there are two taboos that you don't talk about: death and sex. And Osho is certainly one of those people that if you tell him not to do something, he would probably turn around and do it. But that, that was just Osho for you. But the reasons why Osho came out and gave these lectures was because Osho felt that sex energy is the greatest energy in the world. It's the core of all life, not just human life, but all life revolves and evolves through sex. For thousands of years now, that energy has been suppressed, and we've kind of pushed it back into the subconscious. And anytime you push something back into the subconscious, it becomes perverted, it becomes distorted, and it's not healthy for your spiritual growth. And for spiritual growth to be possible, you could use this energy instead of suppressing it. And before we go any further, I want to say this will not be a rated R lecture. It'll be more of a PG lecture. We'll tone it down and keep it within YouTube's frame so we don't get barred or banned from YouTube. So in Osho's book, From Sex to Superconsciousness, he shares us a story on page 103. And the story goes like this. He says, "My beloved ones, I would like to begin my talk with a small story. Many years, centuries ago, in a certain country, there was a great painter. And in his youth, he decided to create a truly great portrait that radiates the bliss of the divine. A portrait whose eyes radiate infinite peace. So he wanted to find someone whose face communicated something of the beyond, of that which is transcendental to this life, transcendental to this world. The artist roamed the country, from village to village, from jungle to jungle, in search of such a person. And at long last he came across a shepherd in the mountains, with that innocence and light in his eyes, with a face and features that held the promise of some celestial home. One look at him was enough to convince anyone that the divine resides in human beings. The artist painted the portrait of the young shepherd. Millions of copies of that portrait sold out. Even in faraway lands, people felt highly blessed just to be able to hang the picture on their walls. And after some years, when the artist had grown old, another idea came to his mind. His experience of life had shown him that the human beings are not all godliness. The devil also exists in them. The idea of painting a portrait reflecting the devil in human beings came to him. The two pictures he thought would complement each other. They would represent the whole human being. In his old age, once again, he sought a man who was not a man but a devil. He went to gambling dens, to pubs, to madhouses, and this person had to be full of hellfire. His face had to show all that was evil, ugly, and sadistic. He searched for the very image of sin. And he had already done a painting of godliness. Now he wanted to portray evil incarnate. And after a long search, the artist finally met a prisoner in a jail. The man had committed 7 murders and had been sentenced to be hung in a few days. Hell was evident in the man's eyes. He looked to be hate incarnate. His face was the ugliest one could possibly hope to find. The artist began to paint him, and when he had completed the portrait, he brought out his earlier picture and set it by the side of the new painting for contrast. It was difficult to assess which was better from an artistic point of view. Both were marvelous. He stood staring at both of them, and then he heard a sob. He turned and saw the chained prisoner crying. The artist was bewildered. He asked, "My friend, why are you crying? Do these pictures disturb you?" And the prisoner said, "All this time I have been trying to hide something from you, but today I have lost it. You obviously do not know that the first picture is also of me. Both portraits are of me. I am the same shepherd you met 20 years ago in the hills. I cry for my downfall. And in the last 20 years, I have fallen from heaven to hell, from the divine to the devil. Osho continues on by saying, I do not know how true this story is. It may be true, it may not be true. But each person's life has two converse sides. In every person, both the divine and the devil exists. In every person, there is the possibility of heaven and the possibility of hell. In every person. Flowers of beatitude can grow, and dirty puddles of ugliness can also form. Every person continuously swings between these two extremes. One can attain to either one of these extremes, but most people end up at the hellish seashore. There are very few fortunate ones who let the divine grow within them. Osho says, can we succeed in letting the divine grow in us? Can we also become like the portrait that radiated godliness? How can this all be done? With this very question, I would like to begin today's talk. How to make a human being's life a paradise, a fragrance, a beauty. And how many human beings know that which is deathless? How many human beings enter the temple of God? What actually seems to happen in life is just the opposite. In childhood, we are in paradise, but by the time we have grown old, we are in hell. What happens is as if from a childhood we go into a constant downfall. The world of childhood is full of innocence and purity, but we gradually begin traveling a road paved with hypocrisy and cunning. And by the time of old age, we are not only old physically, but also spiritually. Not only does the body become weak and infirm, but the soul also falls into a ruinous state. But we simply take this as life and pass away. And religion wants us to raise a question about this. Religion doubts that the state of affairs, our journey in life, must be wrong somewhere. If from heaven we end up in hell, it ought to be just the opposite. This journey ought to be a rewarding one, from suffering to bliss, from darkness to light, from mortality to immortality. And in reality, this alone is the longing, the thirst in one's deepest core of being. The only longing in the being is how to reach the deathless, from the death-bound. The only thirst, the only urge in the being is how to reach from darkness to light, from untruth to truth. But for that voyage to truth, that voyage in search of the divine within one needs a reservoir of energy. One needs to conserve one's energy, and one needs to collect and build up energy so that one becomes a rich source of it. Only then can he be led to the divine. Paradise is not for the weak. The truth of life is not that for those who dissipate their energy and become frail and feeble. Those who squander all life's energies and become weak and pitiable within cannot undertake this expedition. It requires great energy to scale those heights, to go on that expedition. To conserve one's energy is a key to religiousness. Energy needs to be conserved so that we can become a bubbling storehouse of it. But we are weak, a sick generation, losing all of our energy. We go on becoming weaker and weaker until all is lost and only a hollow emptiness is left within. A mere emptiness remains. How do we lose our energy? A person's biggest outlet for losing energy is sex. And as I said to you yesterday, there is a reason why one is ready to lose the energy. Who wants to lose energy? No one. But there is a glimpse of a certain fulfillment. And it is for this that one is ready to lose the energy. There is a certain experience in the moment of orgasm, and it is for that experience that one is ready to lose energy. If that same experience can be had through some other means, one would never be ready to lose the energy through sex. Is there any other way to attain to that same experience? Jumping out of the text a little bit, Osho had stated in the book earlier that meditation was actually discovered through the moment of orgasm, because in the moment of orgasm you have a split second of what it feels like to be in samadhi, to be in total super consciousness, to be one with the divine. Now back to the text. If that same experience can be held through some other means, one would never be ready to lose the energy through sex, Osho says. Is there any other way to attain to that same experience? Is there any other way to realize the very same experience where we move into the deepest of the deep recesses of the human being? Where we touch the highest peak of life? Where we receive a glimpse of life's bliss and peace? Is there any other way? Is there any other way for reaching within oneself? Is there any other way for arriving at the source of peace and bliss of one's own self? If that way is seen, it causes a revolution in one's life. Then one's back turns on sex, and one faces the divine, superconsciousness, and an inner revolution takes place. A new door opens. If we are unable to show humankind a new door, people will continue to move in a repetitive circle and destroy themselves. But the concepts about sex that have existed so far have not enabled the human race to open any door other than sex. On the contrary, the opposite disaster has happened. Nature endows humans with only one door, that of sex. But the teachings down the centuries have closed that door without opening the new door. And in the absence of such a door, the energy in a person starts going around in circles. If there is no new door for that energy to pass through, the swirling and caged energy drives the person insane. Then this insane person not only tries to force open the natural door of sex, but his energy also tries to shatter the walls and windows and flow from there. Thus the sex energy flows out through unnatural routes. This calamity has happened. It is one of mankind's greatest misfortunes. A new door has not been opened, and the old door is already closed. Okay, now I'm going into uncharted territory because what I'm about to read to you, I have not even read myself. So here we go. Osho continues on by saying, "This is why I have stood up openly against all the teachings of anonymity for sex and suppression of sex that have been inflicted on humanity so far. It is because of those teachings that sexuality has not only increased in human beings, but it has also become perverted. But what is the remedy? Can some other door be opened?" And yesterday I said to you, the experience that comes in the moment of orgasm consists of two elements, timelessness and egolessness. Time disappears and the ego dissolves. Because of the absence of the ego and the stoppage of time, one has a glimpse of one's own self, of one's real self. But that glory is momentary. And when we are back, and then we are back in the same old rut. And in the process, we have lost a great moment of energy. We have dissipated a big flow of bioelectric energy. The mind hankers for that glimpse. The mind yearns to grasp it again. And that glimpse itself is so transitory that we have scarcely had it, then it disappears. It doesn't leave even behind a clear memory of itself as to what it was that one experienced. What remains is an urge, an obsession, a mad awaiting to regain that experience. And one remains engaged one's whole life in this attempt, but one can never have that glimpse for more than a moment. This glimpse is also attained through meditation. There are two ways to reach to one's consciousness: sex and meditation. Sex is the way nature provided. Sex is nature's course. Animals have it, birds have it, plants have it, humans have it. So long as human beings make use only of nature's way, they are not above animals, and they cannot be. That door is also available to the animals. The territory of humanness begins the day we open a new door, other than that of sex. Prior to that, we are not human beings. Prior to that, we are humans only in namesake. Prior to that, our life center coincides with the animal's life center only, with nature's life center only. Until we rise above this, until we transcend this, we live the way animals do. We clothe ourselves like a human being. We speak the language of the human being. We maintain all the outward appearances of the human being, but inside, at deep levels of the mind, we are no more than animals. We cannot be more. This is the reason the animal in us bursts out at the slightest available opportunity. At the time of the India and Pakistan partition, we saw how an animal lurks behind the clothing of a human being. We came to know that the people who pray in the mosque and recite the Gita in the temples are capable of. They can loot, they can slaughter, and they can rape. They can do everything. The very people who were always seen praying in the temples and the mosques, they were now seen raping in the streets. And what had happened to them? If a riot happens right now, here people will immediately have the opportunity to take leave of their humanness. And the animal, ever ready in them, will come out. The animal in man is always anxious for free reign. In the crowd, in the riot, man finds the opportunity to throw off his adopted garb of humanity and to forget himself. In the crowd, he develops the courage to let loose the animal that he has seen taming somehow. And this is why no human being has committed to a heinous crime singularly as he does in a crowd. A solitary has some fear of being seen, being opposed, being labeled as an animal. But in the midst of a big crowd of people, one loses his identity. One is not worried about being spotted at all. One is now part and parcel of the mob. Now there is no reason with a name. Now it is just one big crowd. Now the person that does what the big crowd does. And what does the person do? He starts fires. He commits rape. As part of the mob, he finds an opportunity to set the animal hidden in him free. And that is why for every 5 to 10 years, man is anxious for war, is hoping for a riot to break out. If it is under the pretext of a Hindu-Muslim problem, then it is fine with him. If not, a Guranji or Marathi cause will also do as well. If the Gurahatis and the Maharathis are not going for a riot, then a conflict between Hindi-speaking and non-Hindi-speaking people will be as good just for him. He needs an excuse, any excuse, to let loose the insatiable beast in him. The animal in man feels suffocated if kept caged for too long. It howls to be let out. And this animal in him is not vanquished. It is not destroyed until man's consciousness rises above the animal door given by nature. Our life energy has only one natural but animal outlet, and that outlet is sex. Closing that channel creates problems and is very essential that a new door is opened before that closing of the sex, so that the energy can flow in a new direction. This is possible. It has not been done so far because of the simple reason that repression feels easier. Transformation is difficult. It is easier to cover a thing than to sit on it, than to transform it. For transformation, a method is required. Perfecting the method is required. Hence, we choose the easiest way of repressing sex inside. But we forget that nothing can be destroyed by suppression. On the contrary, it only gets strengthened. We also forgot that repressing something intensifies our attraction for it. That which we repress enters the deeper layers of our consciousness. We may repress it during our waking hours, but at night it flashes across our dreams. Inside it waits, anxious to lash out in the slightest opportunity. Repression does not free one from anything. On the contrary, its roots go deeper into the subconscious, and the person is trapped even more deeply. In the very effort to suppress sex, humankind is bound and trapped by it. And this is the reason human beings have no heat period or season as animals have. Humans are sexual around the clock. Throughout the year, there is not a single animal in all the species which is sexual around the clock throughout the year. Animals have a specific period for it, a season for it, which comes and then goes. After that period and season, the animal doesn't think about it again. But look at what has happened to humans. The thing which humans have tried to repress has spread over their lives around the clock throughout the year. And have you ever thought about the fact that no animal is sexual all the time, in all situations, but that humans are sexual all the time, in all situations? Sexuality fumes inside human beings, as if sex were all and everything in life. And how has this come about? How has this disaster occurred? Why has it happened only to humans and not to any animal? There's only one cause. Humans have tried to suppress sex. And in turn, it has spread all over their personality like a poison. And what did we do in order to suppress? We had to condemn it. We had to develop an insulting attitude towards it. We had to degrade it. And we had to abuse it. We had to call it a door to hell. We had to proclaim sex as sin. We had to say that all that is in sex is detestable, only to be despised. We have had to invent all these degrading names for sex in order to justify our suppression of it. But we are not aware in the least that because of these abuses and condemnations, our entire life has become filled with poison. So I want to jump out of the text now and just share a few other thoughts of my own with you, that the whole art of Tantra is opening that new door before the other door closes, before you close the door of sex. And before I go, I want to share this one story with you. I've shared it several times in many of my works and podcasts and in a couple books I wrote. But there's a story of a fisherman, and he was walking down the river bank where he used to fish on the cobblestone bank of the river. And he was walking in darkness because he liked to get out to the fishing spot before the sun came up and be ready, for the morning's light and to catch the morning's fish. But anyway, he was walking along the shore, and he stumbled upon a bag of rocks. And he picks the bag of rocks up and not thinking too much about it. He's like, oh, okay, real cool. I got me a bag of rocks. And he held on to the bag of rocks, and he walked to his fishing spot and finally sat down. And in the darkness, he opened up the bag of rocks out of boredom, and he grabbed a stone and said, this is a good skipping stone. And he threw it into the water and skipped it across the water surface and watched it sink into the water. And he had about maybe 15, 20 rocks in the purse. So he just took his time doing this one at a time, skipping them, boom, 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 down the water surface, and then it would sink into the water. And he did this right up until about the sun came up. And as the sun was starting to get its first glare of light and beams of light over to him, he grasped the last rock that was in that bag. And it was a pretty big rock. But he grabbed that last rock, and he grabbed it. And as he brought the rock up to the height of his head, ready to skip it, a beam of light entered the rock and caught his eye. And he looked at the rock, and he noticed that it was a large diamond. And a moment of happiness came over him. It's like, wow, I have a big, huge diamond. I'm rich. But a moment of sadness also came to him, that he realized that all those rocks in that bag were probably diamonds, and he would have been extremely rich. His whole life would have been enriched for the rest of his existence on the planet if he wouldn't have thrown away all those rocks. And life is a lot like this fisherman's story. Each thing in our life, each activity or each thing that uses up energy in our life is a diamond or a rock. We don't know, but it's up to you to find out and realize before it's too late. Because when you get old, when you get up in your 50s and 60s and 70s maybe, your sexual energy disappears, it dissipates. And that could have been a diamond. You could have used that to obtain super consciousness, but you didn't. You wasted your whole life. Don't waste your whole life and throw away that very last rock if that's the last one you have. And it's never too late to to have at least one glimpse of enlightenment. No matter how old you are or how many rocks you've thrown away in your life, it's never too late to have at least one last diamond and to catch that light and help you to see and realize God and realize godliness in this lifetime, not after you die. So don't waste your whole life and throw that very last rock out as well, not realizing that it was a diamond. And that is the story for today. Thank you for joining me again. I really appreciate you guys listening to this one. I know I'm going out on a limb talking about sex energy, and it is a little bit of a taboo to talk about these things, But be open with your partner and share these insights that I'm sharing with you, and we'll continue to talk another time and get into more depth of how to transform energy and raise it through your chakra system, or raise it up through the kundalini, which is what they call like the serpent energy that's hidden within you, that once awakened, the serpent uncoils and straightens up like through the spine of your back, and energy can flow from your root center all the way up to your super consciousness center, through your hara. Anyway, thanks again for joining me. You guys take care of yourselves. My name is Douglas Grummons. Please check out all my other works on YouTube. I've tried to cover an array of subjects from depression to super consciousness to Zen to yoga. And I think real soon here I'm going to start a yoga series, because yoga has become so predominant in America. And I think it would be very rewarding for me to go back into the Yoga Sutras again, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and relive them again. It's been 10 years since I've read them, and I think I've forgotten almost everything I've read. And even though, like listening to this podcast, we assimilate these things, which means we take them in and they become a part of us, but then we forget them, right? Once it becomes a part of you, you don't need to memorize it and have it readily available. It just becomes a part of you and a part of your soul. So once again, I hope you guys hang out with me and relax and enjoy my words. You guys take care of yourselves. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful life. We love you all. Bye.